This is a Global Skills Podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together. Welcome to the Global Skills Podcast. Today we have Polly Boardman, a senior global learning and talent leader who cares deeply about how people grow, from early career through to senior leadership. She spent her career designing learning strategies, modernizing performance systems, and strengthening leadership capability at every stage of the talent journey. Polly has led L&D, talent, OD, EDI, and well-being portfolios with multi-million pound scope, and has introduced AI-enabled learning ecosystems that make development more accessible, personalized, and future-focused. She is passionate about building skills-based, data-driven approaches that genuinely improve how people learn, progress, and lead. Blending behavioral science with practical, inclusive design, Polly is known for creating environments where people feel supported, stretched, and able to thrive, and for helping organizations build leaders who can do the same for others. Polly, you're so welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
So I would love to learn more about how you ended up in L&D. What was the first early steps in your career?
Well, I've always been fascinated by people. I think I had lots of different groups of friends when I was younger, so that group dynamic was really interesting. That sort of led me to go and study psychology at university. And then I took advantage of any mentoring programs that came up and became a mentor myself quite early in my career. Um, and so it was quite a non-traditional route in. I actually worked for social and economic programs, first of all, and that was very much around getting people into volunteering opportunities, training them, helping them set up enterprises, and ultimately getting them into work. And that was really interesting, very rewarding. Lots of insight into barriers that people face getting into employment. And then I moved into organisational development later in my career. And I've spent the last sort of 8 years holding senior positions in learning and talent development. Um, and it's been really interesting. I think my passion is around helping organisations to use different blended learning opportunities to really focus in on their staff and progress them in the way that is going to work for both the business and for the individual. And really looking at leadership development, talent journeys, and bringing that all together as part of an individual journey in their companies.
I'd love to go back to your earlier career where you were talking about helping the underrepresented. And you mentioned there about barriers, because I think that now these barriers, it nearly feels like we've gone full circle again for people. But I'd love to know about the barriers that you felt that they faced back then.
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting because we focus a lot now on gender and people of colour are the kind of the key underrepresented groups that I've come up a lot more to look at targeted programs for currently. But back then, it was really around people's backgrounds, where they lived, whether they had education, if they'd been able to go to university, and some of those blockages. And I think they were the less conventional reasons that people might not have been able to get into employment. And what I found working with some of those individuals is there were so many ideas and so much creativity, and it just needed to be given a platform where they could actually have time and a bit of support and some guidance into how they could channel that and which routes to go. So it's really, like I said earlier, really interesting to hear about those individuals' journeys and how we could then help them shape their careers for the future.
And I know it's not necessarily the role you're doing today, but the reason I'm probably so drawn to it is the fact that many people are experiencing now either that bias or they're not being able to get even through to interview stage. But obviously you had the ability to support them. And I'm probably asking this question for young people today more than anyone because they don't have the knowledge and experience that professionals do that know how to navigate to secure that next role. What were the steps that you took with them at the time that made the difference? Was it just the fact that you sat and listened and dug deep to find their unique skills, or what was it that helped get them the role?
I think that's such an important question because I recently saw a stat that 56% of people get their next role through their networks. And if you are a young person who's starting out, you might not have access to those networks or being able to make those same connections. So it is vital that we do support people. For that particular program, it was very much around connecting people with the right skills. So there's a lot of different training programs that are available. So whether that was for technical skills, or softer skills such as like presentation or communication, even giving them mock interview formats. So some people had never been through an interview before, and it's trying to get them to understand what a format would be, how to answer questions, what to do, maybe what not to do. Um, and giving them a place where they could practice that rather than going completely new to that situation. And I think in terms of some of the enterprises, is that people had small business ideas and it was accessing funding that could get those ideas off the ground. I worked with a charity that had their own funding pot that people could apply to. So it was working with people on those applications and how they could bring those ideas to life. And then looking at more wider sponsorship and things like the National Lottery and places that could really build those off the ground initiatives and make them a reality for people.
And does this still exist today? Because it sounds absolutely what we need to be doing on a larger scale. Do you know if this sort of service still exists?
I think it's changed over time. I mean, we're going back, about 12 or 13 years ago now, but I think it's adapted. And I think now with AI and other accessible platforms, you can provide this in community centres through different organisations. And I think the need has changed slightly. But I do think it's something that needs to be revisited. It was very targeted work for the housing association that I worked for at the time. We had particular areas that we were regenerating, and it was really about working with those people who lived on in those properties on those areas. But I absolutely agree. I think there needs to be more around that career support. And I think some of the work that I've done in that kind of talent and sort of that talent acquisition and attraction space is really trying to help graduates or people who are looking at maybe transitioning into different roles or who are really early on in their career and are trying to decide what they want to do and trying to give them as much information as possible to try and access those routes into employment.
I think it's also really interesting how, as you said before, it was with housing that you were connected with, but there's such a strong connection between learning, working, housing, and they're the fundamentals of life. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so you went on then to progress into organizational development, L&D. Tell me a bit about what made you decide to take that path after doing the work that you had done.
It was a couple of things. So there was a bit around my own personal development and professionally wanting to progress. And I think the role that I was in, whilst I really enjoyed it, there wasn't really any move upwards. So I did a bit of a sideways move and did some change management. And then from there, I got in the room with some of our executive leaders and started to work a bit more around organisational design. And it seemed like a natural fit to move into L&D there. I'd also been quite active in our women's network and around championing different initiatives for females in the organisation. And again, that kind of went part and parcel with some of the learning and the development programs that I think were kind of ideas. And it was really about bringing me in to bring those ideas to life and think up new concepts and ways of doing things. I think we had quite a good, my first role as head of, I had quite a good program that I inherited of blended learning and technical skills that are out there in e-learning. And so it gave me the opportunity to really look in on leadership and kind of a bit more around succession planning. And then what later became, when we went through an organizational merger, gave me the opportunity to kind of go back to those change management skills and help prepare people for what was going to be coming over the next sort of year or two, how they could sort of develop themselves, look at their transferable skills, and also kind of build a new culture within that business.
And what role do you think L&D plays in organizational development?
I think it's a key role, and I think this often gets overlooked because L&D is, I think, negotiable. And I say that in terms of it's probably the most flexible budget, that if you need to push back or if you need to develop more, you've got that flexibility within an L&D budget. And I think a lot of organizations have this capacity battle around attendance at training programs, at training days. And it's very much around how do you balance that and make sure people really understand the benefit when L&D is integral to people's professional journeys that they have. And I think that's where we sort of need to move it away from, oh, it's training, and actually create it's learning, it's development pathways, it's progression, it's future proofing businesses. So they've got the skills, they've got the qualities in their people. And I think there's a lot around organizational capability and looking at role design and what do we need for an organization. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be role based going forward. I think it's going to be more skills based, and how you can look at you've got lots of talented people in your organization. There could be some mobility here, and how we move people around, feed your pipeline. You can look at succession with the people and the skills that you've got, and it might just be looking a little bit more broader at what their pathways are and not restricting them to one type of role. And I think that's where learning and development comes in, because it's very much around planning that strategy and being out there and knowing what the trends are and what is going to change, and being able to provide that expertise and guidance to your senior exec who are going to be making those decisions about what the strategy is going sort of longer term.
I think when we spoke before, this is where I get quite excited because in the space that we operate in, we are trying to bring L&D together with talent management, with talent acquisition, with this common skills language and the skills data to not just fix the gap today, but future proof the talent of tomorrow. How important do you think interoperable skills intelligence is? So, not just a really good view of internally the skills taxonomy or ontology, but having that to connect externally. So future talent joining a business seamlessly is recognized, not through keyword screening by AI, but like seamlessly recognized into a skills intelligence that the organization is using so that we're reducing bias as much as possible.
Oh, it's extremely important. And I worry how many good candidates might be lost if you haven't got the right systems in place. And I sort of take it back to making sure that if you have got roles available and you are trying to attract talent, that you are equally giving them as much information as possible about what the organisation does. We've run in businesses I've worked in, we've run seminars around this is what a career looks like. This is what we're looking for out of the people applying. This is the skills you need. This is the kind of culture we have. Signposting people to different resources to get more information, to give them the best possible approach. Because I think, unfortunately, with things like ChatGPT, it can be great, but it can also produce multiple applications that read exactly the same. And if you are a recruiter and you're looking at where you're trying to spot the differences, it might be somebody who's attended one of those workshops has heard something and they're able to actually translate that into why they would sit well in that business. And I think sort of longer term, I think skills are really going to change, and
Yeah.
it's happening incredibly quickly. And you could create a strategy and plan for the next 2 years, but you need to be on it every sort of quarter, reviewing that and looking at the data. What does it show us? What externally are we seeing? So not just your internal audit systems, but what is happening outside and what trends are we seeing and how that translates into what you need as a business, rather than thinking, oh, we can do a 10-year strategy and we'll just stick to that. And too many strategies by year three, if people have lost what the objectives are, they're not continued anymore. So I think it's really looking at what you can analyze and how that's going to sort of work going forward.
I've always been a big champion of L&D, and especially when I worked in talent acquisition. So we were sourcing talent for Fortune 1000 companies, and I'd always try and encourage the company to wrap the L&D in the benefits package because I think a bit like when you decided to move from one role to another, you didn't see the progression. L&D is such a really good way because not everyone wants to move up. Some people want to move, transfer their skills, or I think about returning parents, for example, now and how much they need to catch up on and on the learning. What role do you think L&D can play around employee engagement, talent acquisition? And do you think it's been leveraged enough by companies?
Lots to unpack there. So I think I'm so glad you said about the attraction and L&D, because one of the companies that I've worked for, we measure what people, the reasons that people apply. And it was really great to see that L&D was constantly in the top two reasons, particularly for experienced hires who, as you said, are moving from other companies who have got experience of what a good culture might be, what a good offer is. And to hear that the L&D offer is what is selling them on taking that role is really, really positive. And I think organisations can always do more. I know there's a lot of challenges, people, sort of bandwidth, capacity, budgets, but there are simple things that you can do. And where I've worked previously, I brought in a what we call the Growing Families program, which is where people who are on a career break or have taken parental leave receive a series of coaching to support them. And that starts before they go on their career break. Whilst they're away, they can access that. And then when they return, they've sort of got 6 months of support. And that can be anything from planning your exit and your entry. And it could be coaching on how you can balance your time. It could be utilizing your own personal development plan. We've had a really good uptake from both male and female parents on that program. And I think it's vital because a lot of companies do the return to work. But I think actually that planning ahead when you might have a bit more time before your world completely changes is really helpful. Just understanding some of the challenges. I think you can do something really simple like buddy people with someone else who's returned, say, a year or two before. Some of my most useful conversations have been over coffees for 15 minutes with another mum, and we've just talked about a couple of things, and you resolve some problems that come up or a challenge that you might have. And that doesn't cost anything. And it doesn't impact on your time too much, but you can get a lot from that. And I think companies should do more. I think um, women do get kit days when they come back to work. It's around 8, and actually utilising those and giving people good things to do on their kit days. And you don't necessarily have to come into the office. That could be training that you can do online. And some great stuff I've seen is when line managers kind of curate. Here are the key things you need to know that have been happening in the last 6 months, and it might be a link to an online meeting, or it might be some articles to read, or just some information that someone can digest in 20 minutes, and it gives them a big picture and just things like that. So it's not just on the people who are out of the business, it's also on the people who are supporting them coming back in as well.
I think you said there about, becoming a parent. Like for me, it was night and day. It's like I returned to the workplace, but I was a different person altogether.
Mhm.
And I don't think anything prepares you for, that juggle of maybe your baby being sick, but you still have meetings. You're trying to, got a call. You have to look at it's I don't know if I can even define or describe what it's like, but you return to the same workplace, the same colleagues, the same workflow. And do you think L&D has any role to play in the psychological support of a returning parent to the workplace?
Quick question. Do you actually know what skills exist across your organisations today? Or are decisions still being made on job titles, CVs, and assumptions around who can be reskilled and upskilled? You see, as AI reshapes work and organisations really face that pressure to cut costs, the real challenge isn't just skills gaps, it's understanding which skills are transferable and which can be redeployed into the future with a bit of upskilling. So, for the listeners of Global Skills Podcast, Abodu, our sponsor, has created this free Skills AI readiness assessment. It gives leaders clarity in just 3 minutes. It shows skills gaps, automation exposure, and where future-ready capabilities already exist within your business. No data upload, no preparation, just clarity for the future of your organisation. Visit abodu.com/global skills podcast. Now, back to the episode.
I think it does. But I think that is in combination with the organisation also supporting. It shouldn't just fall to your HR teams or your L&D teams or the women's network. It should be a group response to how we're supporting people. But in terms of L&D, I definitely think there are things that they teams can push or can initiate within businesses. As I've said, we've talked about coaching and trying to upskill people and give them opportunities. But I think there's also putting the emphasis on the teams that they're coming back into. Who are those managers or those mentors who are supporting those people? Are they having conversations around what the progression routes are or what their ideas are for the next sort of 6 to 12 months of them returning to work? And I know sometimes people will make an assumption that, oh gosh, just let them come back and ease in slowly. But that person might not want to do that. They might be thinking, actually, this is the next thing for me. Or it could be absolutely the opposite. And that person's thinking, I need to negotiate going down to part-time hours, and how am I going to do that? And the only way people know is if those sort of senior leaders who are responsible for these teams are having regular conversations and not just assuming the conversation that happened when the person's first come back is the same as a conversation in 6 months' time. Um, and I think I can't emphasize how much communication is important in these situations. But I think teams we looked a lot at talent development programs, and I did some consultation earlier in the year when I was devising a new kind of program of different talent for underrepresented groups. And what was really interesting to hear is that it's great to have external women in leadership programs, and I've put some in place that have had really positive returns. 60% of people progressing through them, getting promotions, getting new roles. But what I was also hearing is that that's only great if you've got the time to do it. And even with dedicated study leave and sort of allowances made by work, people are still finding it difficult to have the bandwidth to attend those programs, to focus in on them. And I found that really interesting. And it helped to then create this portfolio of talent programs where people could almost pick and mix. So if you have got time and you think you can focus on that longer term program for 6 months, great, you can do that. But we also have panel events that are an hour. We have networking opportunities, there's sponsorship, there's coaching, all different things, so that there's access for everybody. Because I think that's one of the key things, accessibility to these things. The time, unfortunately, and I know this goes for any male colleagues who are sort of in this situation, but sort of the data show the time and time again, it's the women where the gap is. But for females who've come back into the workplace, they've got this unseen labour of their second job, which is often, that you don't switch off from that job. And then you've got your professional job that you're trying to balance. And so I think it's making sure that you're giving opportunities that will fit in with that kind of work style. And too often, leadership programs, particularly traditional leadership programs, have been designed around one role. And that's normally a role that doesn't include childcare responsibilities. Or a lot of colleagues I've spoken to recently are talking about aging parents and looking after their own parents, and that being a factor, or leadership that is focused on particular styles of leadership instead of looking at neurodiversity and how that can now affect people. And we need to adapt and look at programs. So there's a whole lot that L&D can consider as part of what they are putting out there, but then you need the organisation to champion it and make it.
I wonder, could AI play a pivotal role here in terms of, I mean, my belief is AI should be augmenting working professionals. And so if we augment their capacity to produce more in less time, then the created time space is put into investing in reskilling, upskilling, networking, events. What do you think is the future of AI with L&D? And do you see that time being created for people to invest in themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can craft an hour a week for yourself, for your own professional development, that is protected time just for you, then you'll see a big impact within 2 to 3 months. And to do that, you can use AI tools, and you can use automation, you can simplify tasks, you can save yourself time and things. And I think L&Z's role is to really get those skills out there. We've run programs previously with AI Essentials, trying to get as many of the companies through their teams through that, to understand how they can really simplify tasks and speed up activities that they're doing. And that allows them time for more collaboration and sort of one-on-one work. And so I think that is going to be vital. And I think it's making AI work for you. It's interesting because I think you can get a lot of data, information, and insight very, very quickly, but it doesn't replace those conversations. So it's making sure that you use AI, but you still have real conversations with people to understand what the challenges are for them, because they could quickly change over time, and that might not necessarily come through in the research that you're accessing.
What do you think is keeping heads of L&D awake at night?
And the responsibility of knowing what AI impact is going to be on the whole company, I think that comes up a lot around what roles are we going to need for the future? What skills will those roles need? What direction is it going? I think workforce planning is very, very tricky in the current sort of economic climate, and those cycles of workplace planning have to be flexible at the moment. And I think that that's probably a challenge. I think understanding how AI will impact. So we talk a lot about those more junior roles and how some of the tasks that those roles might be doing, that sort of entry level, might be replaced by AI in the future. And so what does that mean in sort of 5 years' time? If you haven't had those entry level people come in, train and develop and progress, there's going to be a big gap. Um, in the staff and the skills that you've got. So I think it's around how you can support there. And I think with everyone, there's always this capacity issue. And it's just trying to make sure you've got the right learning initiatives in place that people can access, that doesn't impact on or become secondary to their day-to-day work. It's almost complementary to what they're trying to do.
One thing we do with companies is enable employees to understand their own skills gap, like empower them. Yes, L&D can have that information, but really empower them to know what their skills gap is today, depending on the role that they're doing, but where they'd like to go and what's that gap. So, and one of the reasons we got very passionate about trying to empower the individual is that when we looked at the learning completion rates of maths courses, they were really low. And when we really dug into it and surveyed, it was this kind of inertia. When you're served up too many courses, too much choice, you end up not choosing anything or starting and not completing. What do you think about personalized learning journeys for individuals depending on where they are in their life moving forward?
Yeah, I agree. I think the amount of times you get pitched, oh, you can get this e-learning platform and you get 10,000 courses, and oh my goodness, it's just an overload. I do like that you can create those career pathways, and you can. We've been doing it for a while on different LMS systems that I've used, but where you can feed different types of content to individuals based on their role, their practice area, their kind of focuses, and kind of if there's organisational trends as well that they need to meet. And I think that can be really helpful, particularly if it's in different formats as well. So it's not necessarily all visual content; it could be audio, it could be um, looking at small tasks or things that you can build into your day-to-day work as well. And then I think that needs to complement when you do have um, training time, face-to-face time, what you're actually using that for, and what is that should be for things that you can't necessarily get from your online content. And that might be face-to-face time with your MDs. That might be fireside chats with senior leaders that you don't necessarily have contact with. It might be having conversations or identifying challenges and thrashing them out in a room. And I think that's where people need to really look at their overall L&D strategy and what their programs are, and then start to identify where is best place to put that content and how to get it across.
You mentioned, and you might not have the answer to this, did mention one of the, I guess, worries that could be keeping L&D leaders up at night is around the fact that maybe early talent is not currently being included in the recruitment cycle. And what would that look like in a few years' time? You are right, it'll create a gap of they would be junior managers at that point, I suppose, or more knowledge workers, account directors. What is the answer? Is it that AI will do all those roles, or what are you seeing companies doing to kind of address this future potential knowledge gap?
Yeah, a good question. And I'll be honest, I don't think I've got the answer, but what my suggestion would be is looking at those transferable skills and that mobility that you could have in companies. And so you're not necessarily bringing in those junior roles to progress through the same career pathways that their predecessors have, and actually looking at kind of career families almost that those roles can be utilized in other areas of the business. And I think it's interesting. We looked at economists and finding different routes into that way of work and looking at apprenticeships that you could start there because there is a real gap around gender, kind of the recruitment coming through. And it might be another way of attracting people to that role. But we understand that those apprenticeships, that if you put any apprenticeship in place, it's what is next for that person afterwards. And that might not necessarily be that role at that company, but also it might be a very different role. And so I think it's just making sure that people at that level are provided with a range of skills opportunities, but also have access to the senior leaders for their networks, for sponsorship,
Mm.
for mentorship and coaching. And I think you need all of those. It's not necessarily just mentoring or just coaching. You do need people to open doors for you. You can bang on them. But it is always really helpful if we ever have work experience students come into places that I've worked, we'll always ask them, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can start seeing things that I'm sharing. You might have access to more sort of training or learning information from that way, rather than your traditional routes of just googling or going to ChatGPT.
I think they're great ideas that you're saying. And actually, as you spoke there, I was thinking a company that becomes very aware and proactively starts creating those career families, like you were describing, it's nearly a company with a conscience. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there's other companies with a conscience, and maybe it's bringing a cohort of them together to say, look, between us all, let's take on X number young people, and then maybe it's transferring the skills, and they have some time in one company and then the next, and it's sharing that knowledge base. But it would be a shame to think that nothing is done
Mm.
um, for the next generation. And if you could wave a magic wand at what's happening now and in the next sort of year or two, what would you like to see happening within L&D?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would like there to be more recognition around the role that it plays across the whole journey. So it's not, I kind of call it a talent journey. So from the moment someone is recruited or applies to the moment they leave and become alumni, they should have a journey and it should be a positive one. And I think it's for companies understanding that that journey is integral to culture and what people are saying about your business and how people respond to it and reflect to it. And L&D is becoming more and more important in terms of why people are choosing to work for certain companies and um, what keeps them there. And just actually recognizing that, making sure that they continue to invest in it. And I'd like to see more, I suppose, responsibility and ownership at an exec level for sponsoring, for not waiting for people, your L&D teams to say, we'd like to bring this program in. Having senior leaders who have got sight of this and are championing it and saying, we haven't got this, program in place for this group that we view as unrepresented. What can we do? Right. How can we make this happen? How can I come and be part of this? Because I think sometimes there's a breakdown of people don't necessarily know how they can empower or what they can do. So they sort of take a seat back, or they might be wary of doing the wrong thing. And actually just getting people to embrace that and say, "Look, I want to be part of this. Tell me what I could do. Or I've got an idea. Can we get that off the ground?" Because these initiatives don't need to cost a lot of money. Some of the things I've done in the past have been pro bono, have been using your internal talent to deliver. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It just requires a little bit of time and some support.
Yeah, and the right people. Yeah, it's a fantastic. I think the more you speak, Polly, the more I'm really realizing L&D, the intrinsic value right across the organization. But I don't think necessarily that comes across in some companies today. So hopefully some listeners will be getting ideas from you. We have a closing tradition to the podcast where you can answer one of two questions or both. I won't stop you from answering both. The first is, have you a skill that you used when you're younger that you don't currently use and that you'd like to use again? And then maybe if I could ask from the perspective, because we touched on returning parents and if they've been out of the workplace and it's quite a challenging time, obviously, everyone's upskilled, reskilled, and we're barely keeping up and we're in the workplace. I can't imagine what it'd be like coming back in right now. What advice would you give them in terms of what could you do to upskill?
Mm, good questions. For the first one, I would say I was recently clearing out my wardrobe, and I used to do quite a bit of visual merchandising when I was younger, in retail. And I thought I need to build a capsule wardrobe for 2026 and give that some attention. But also, I really love color and those kind of concepts that come from that. And I feel where I have leaned on AI quite a bit in my design work, actually, I need to bring a bit more of my personality back into that through my own ideas. So that is one of my objectives for next year. And I think in terms for people returning to work, whether that is through parental leave or through career breaks or for another reason, I think it's building your network internally. And if you can reach out and do that before you come back, if it is parental leave, use those kit days to have some lunches or coffees with people. You need to have strong supporters there, people to rely on, people to lean on. And I think having those conversations can give you some tips and tricks very quickly of what to do to help ease yourself in, and also just provide reassurance that most working parents are just, it's an ongoing battle that you're going through and you're not alone in that, and to really take stock of that and take a breath and not punish yourself.
Polly, thank you so much. I think today you've really brought home to me just the human side of L&D and just recognizing every type of person, every situation that they're in. And you've brought, whether you've realized it or not, you've shared some really good ideas. Really good.
I hope it's helpful. I mean, I'm always happy to have those conversations and just share some insight, and sometimes it is a 5-minute collaboration conversation and can just give someone a different perspective or a way of thinking, oh, actually, I could do this. And then they go away and do it. And for me, that's brilliant if that can be inspired.
Well, we will make sure to include links to contact you at the bottom of the episode. But just thank you so much for coming on today. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, tap subscribe so you never miss the latest insights. And if you've a moment, leaving a quick rating really helps people find the show. For early access to new episodes, event invitations, and the chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com. The future of skills belongs to all of us. Proudly sponsored by Abodu, empowering organisations and educators with world-class skills technology to build a better future for everyone.